Hello, everybody, and welcome to this online international event dedicated to a theme that I consider to be so timely that it is almost urgent: the identity of the theatre artist and the role of the theatre critic. My name is Octavian Sayu, and I'm the initiator and the chair of this conference. And I like to say from the very, very beginning that I feel profoundly grateful to all the people and entities that have proved to be supportive in this project. I'm talking about friends, colleagues from all around the world who have joined with me in creating a platform for cultural dialogue today. I think it is important to maintain the sense of cultural exchanges across and beyond all borders, because, of course, the world we live in is so troubled that we can barely find a way forward, and yet we can still talk to one another, we can still communicate with one another. And this is a privilege that we must at all costs uphold and cherish. I'd like to say that the idea for this conference came from a series of dialogues and conversations related to the same question: what is happening with the condition, the status, the profile of the theatre artists today? How can they respond to the challenges of a world that seems to be lost in suffering and despair? And also, the other question that we started from is equally important, because it addresses the notion of the theatre critic as being a partner, as being someone who abandons the old routines in order to embrace a new cultural, social, and spiritual reality. I am very, very pleased that this project has been met with great enthusiasm and has been supported by the International Theatre Institute, the Critical Stages web journal of the International Association of Theatre Critics, by the IATC Hong Kong, and most particularly by the main organizer, Sibiu International Theatre Festival. I would like to say that it is really, really special to realize that there are so many artists and critics right now with me, symbolically speaking, in this encounter from different parts of the world. And there are very, very few feelings that can be more satisfying than that of togetherness. And the fact that we can be together despite all these barriers and distances is indeed, for me, extremely rewarding. And I like to say that I am primarily a spectator. I'm somebody who loves watching theatre, trying to understand theatre, and trying to embrace theatre with a penetrating gaze. And from that point of view, I think the critic is somebody who loves the artists, who loves performing arts, who loves engaging with the experience of being there. The critic is also a connector, and I think some of the most important critics that I've had a privilege of encountering in my professional career are great connectors. They facilitate dialogue, they provide opportunities for exchanges, and they are at the very heart of some important networking projects. And some of these critics, I'd like to say, are with me today in this conference, as are some very, very significant artists. And I think the cultural specificity of this conference relates equally to its topic, but also to the fact that artists and critics are together in a shared symbolic imaginary space that invites all of us to contemplate the possibilities of the present and of the future. It sounds very disheartening to consider what theatre artists might have to do in the near future, but at the same time, it is inspirational to consider the possible options that lie ahead of us. We need to affirm the values and the virtues of theatre together in order for everybody else to understand that our field is not a commodity, but a necessity for humankind. And with this in mind, I'm going to invite a very special dear friend of mine, the president of Sibiu International Theatre Festival, to share some thoughts about the event that he's been curating for more than 23 years and about its involvement in this conference. I have been fortunate enough to be part of Sibiu Festival for a number of years, and I have witnessed its growth, and I have seen it become an epicenter of culture, performing arts, and spirituality in Europe. There are people literally from all over the globe who turn up for Sibiu every year. Last year, for the first time, the festival went online, and it became a different type of encounter, but it triggered the same interest. And I believe, quite frankly, that it is the merit of the team, it is the merit of the people involved, and it is the merit of this never abandoned belief that Konstantin and I share and try to reinforce at all times and at all costs. Theatre matters. So Konstantin, I'd like to ask you now to say a few words as an introduction to our online conference today. Everybody, Konstantin Kyriak.
Very good afternoon, very good morning, very good evening for all the people that got their times to join us. It's so important to give you, first of all, a good will that are coming from our team, from our people. And I want to thank to Octavian for his introduction. And I might bring in this discussion another dimension that was not mentioned. The audience, the public. We need, all of us, to give them emotion. We need to give them hope. We need to give them a sense of what means human beings in this moment. There is so big pain, a lot of tears, and we need to push now the smile. We need to push the hope in front of the audiences. What is the way to join them? The audience, the public, the human beings are the reasons of us, and we need to build this. For that, we decided this year, the theme of the festival, to be building hope together. The festival will preserve the dates, usually in June, will be between 11 and 20 of June. 10 days will be offline and will be online and will be also hybrid. Nothing will be normal as in the past. So we might do together, thinking, discussing, trying to find a solution. What is the way to build the new normality? And I think in this moment, it's so important, everybody to have this positive way. It's not time for crying. It's time for stories. It's time for smiling, singing, dancing, but first of all, for thinking what are the best solutions to be together. And we might do the best to push our politicians to understand that culture, it is a strategic dimension of the human beings. If we are looking in the past, in the history, what was the way to build the civilization? Culture was one of the first dimensions in what means human beings. So the festival will be online and offline, and also will be many hybrid, let's say, dimensions. we are in a position to, after a heroic work, to have a digital stage. I don't know how many festivals, theaters, institutions can have this, but done in a very professional manner. We have the technical structure to do everything for shows online and offline. So all the shows that we built it after the past festival are in two dimensions at least. One hybrid, one online and one offline. So now we have a subscription for this digital stage, and we have shows for 1 month, for 3 months, for 6 months, for 1 year. And for 1 year, we have 30 shows already prepared in a very, very professional way, with high quality definition in sound, in what means image, and so on. We are working with the most important televisions coming from TV5 Monde, with Arte, with ZDF, with Deutsche Welle, and definitely with Romanian national television. We'll do all the other events together with the festival in both dimensions, in online and offline. Will be the Sibiu Performing Arts Market, will be Terme Forum, will be the PhD platform also. Will be a lot of young new artists that got this power to be in a very innovative way on this dialogue. That means the link between audience and artist. In the same time, we are working with a lot of international projects, and will be in your conference very important names as Nassim, as Alexandra Badia, and the other Data Tavaze, and so on, that will be in the festival, but also on the steps that are building the festival before and after the festival. We are working very closely with the universities, because it's so important to show to the students they have a future. All the time in our thinking might be past, today, and definitely future. And to be all the time a dialogue. And all the time what I said, stories, smile, hope, linking everything. So we are in a position to build a new theater, a new center of congresses, and an institute of research with the link with the most important institutes in the world. We have the head of the Romanian Academy that approved already this. Also, the community are giving a strong support for it. We'll do also in the research and education level new studies. We are starting from autumn a new MA in directing, and will be the most important directors from all over the world that are working with the National Theatre, but also with the festival, able to bring the young generation to be together in this field of education, and first of all for research. We'll do also a technical formation in sound, line, video, and so on. And it is so important for our countries to work in this dimension. And not in the end, we are doing MMA in English for all the students from all around the world in theater studies. And I'm very glad to work with Octavian in this dimension. For sure, will be so many exciting projects, and I'm sure in these 2 days will be so many projects that will be born. I'm able to bring everything as a partner in Sibiu Festival, and we are open for all the exciting experiences, but in the same time with the power of hundreds of thousands audience that are giving us the power of what we are doing. So I wish you a very good debate, a very good power inside, good emotion, good also meaning in what you are doing. So I'm cross fingers and let's do the best for the human beings. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Konstantin, for this enthusiastic, high-spirited, and mobilizing speech at the beginning of the conference. We need such messages, and we need to be reminded that above and beyond the details, the topics, the subject matter of a conference are the fundamental values of theater and humanity. So thank you for putting those at the center of our event. Thank you for being so open to my initiative of creating this conference. And thank you for your never-ending faith in what you are doing and in the meaning of Sibiu Festival for the world. I have to say that I have been involved with Sibiu Festival for more than 17 years now, and I have been happy to discover so many artists and to have dialogues with hundreds and hundreds of important artists from literally all over the planet. However, there is one with whom I discovered a sense of profound affinity and for whom I have a deep, deep respect, because to me, he impersonates the notion of the artist with multiple identities, but also the artist with one clear identity, which relates to the genuineness, to the authenticity of his beliefs. I'm talking about Jaroslav Fred, who is the artistic director of Czar Theatre Company from Wrocław, and at the same time, the director of the Grotowski Institute. And in what Jaroslav Fred does as a man of the theatre, one can sense that there is no apposite definition for the variety, for the multiple dimensions involved in his work. He can be perhaps described conventionally, formally, as a theatre director, but I feel it is not enough, because he is his own playwright, his own scriptwriter, his own dramaturg, his own actor at times, his own musician, and his own producer. And he covers these different types of cultural dimensions with mobility, with flexibility, and with grace. And the result is something that in itself cannot be labeled, cannot be termed, cannot be categorized. The works of Czar Theatre really belong to that very, very, very special and intimate experiences of theatricality, which leaves one wondering about the meanings that they have absorbed, leaves one asking themselves questions about their responsibility as a spectator, and at the same time create something that is meaningful at a spiritual and intellectual level. Some of Jarek's shows have been featured by Sibiu Festival, and I'm talking particularly about one of them that has become iconic for his method, for his way of working, feeling, and thinking in the theater. And I'm referring to Armin's Sister, a performance that has redefined the notion of anthropological theater, and a performance that testifies to Jarek's ability to create theater from something that is not a play or a script, but is a deep human truth. So I'd like to invite the first keynote speaker of this conference to share something about his views, about his perceptions of what it means to be an artist with multiple identities. Jaroslav Fred.
Oh, thank you, Octavian, for the introduction. I'm very honored to have a few minutes opportunity to open this conference. And I'm especially happy that I met Konstantin again, because indeed, we, Octavian, we met in Sibiu. Who not, let's say, was our first live contact. And thank you for your friendship. Thank you for all those years. And we hope that soon we meet again there and there and there. I'm very, very happy about the title of the conference, this and that, almost infinitive chain beyond, because this is a time beyond or, this is a time which belongs to end, to conjunction. There is no more possibility, I think, in our days to have in theater, and especially in the domain of humanism, this divided regions, divided zones of competence, which are exclusive and they are not connected. I'm doing this or that. No, I'm doing this and that and that and that. I have a privilege to speak to you as well as the director of the Grotowski Institute, which marks its 30th anniversary. Yes, it's more than 31 actually, a year of our activity. At the very beginning, after Jerzy Grotowski's creative trajectory, when he left Poland, of course, there was a second studio run by Zbigniew Cinkutis. And then Professor Rosiński and many other professors established, and now look for the very first title of our place, the Center for Jerzy Grotowski's Work and Theatrical and Cultural Research. Already in this very long title, he wanted to place all of this and that and that. Knowing, feeling, understanding that the real work on the field of theater is so complex. I believe that now we are really in the moment of an almost new topology of theatrical fields. Yeah, some big power of a humanism confronted with, for example, with pandemia, because that's what we are speaking about. It not belongs to the pandemic time. It belongs to much bigger tendency in the humanism. Yeah, how we have to work with this and that and that and that. I don't know how you are familiar with Jerzy Grotowski and his personal biography. One of his favorite book was Le Comte de Monte Cristo, The Comte of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. Really, he was many times in a private personal meeting related to it, especially to the moment when the Comte, the prince, is in a prison, and in his mind emerged a great idea to write down a history of France, the huge history, but he has nothing. He had, even in the being prisoner, he had to invent the way how to use a quarter or just a fragment of a pencil he had, and even paper, and the way how he wrote, everything he had to invent from almost zero to write a huge project, a history of France. I'm feeling that we theater people are in this situation, not in being in the prison, or opposite, being forced to invent or reinvent actual tools to realize our very long-term and very high, with a very high horizon plans. And especially now, in the pandemic time, we are trying to use existed form of communication, but try to understand them differently, not as a substitution of a life and real work, but rather as a tools which can accomplish some processes and stay with us. That's what goes, for example, in Grotowski Institute. I have a pleasure to announce, using this conference, that just right now, because of the autumn lockdown, we have recorded several of our performances. Just yesterday, we released another, Ophelia. I Came to You, River, is a Hamlet scene from the perspective of Ophelia. Or next week, next Tuesday, we will finally announce Angeli, my production, which the complexity of recording gave us enormous, being a challenge, yeah, but enormous pleasure as well, yeah, to see those layers, and the layers of work which always are in every theater piece. I mean, sound, singing, yeah, the vocalities, like texts, of course, every sound and every structure of actions, then the ambient and vibrations, and how all of this transformed to the recording. This was finally I wanted. It was a pleasure. It was not only an obligation and a kind of result that in the lockdown we can do nothing. No, we found a deep sense in it. But I don't want to speak about our recordings on, rather about the complexity of a humanism, of the practicing humanism by theater centers, because this is what really goes when we are doing that and that and that. In our 30 years of our activity, I'm working here 27 years just, and having a honor to be a director from 17 years. And one of my first decision in the Center for Jerzy Grotowski's work in theatrical and cultural research, I wanted to change the name, but not change this big horizon of practices. So now the Grotowski Institute is of course condensed name, but we even enlarge our activities, establishing a key places on the map of Wrocław. I mean, Studio Nagrobli and our bakery, Center for Performing Arts. So now the Grotowski Institute is not anymore dedicated exclusively to the laboratory tradition and the Jerzy Grotowski tradition. Is a live, vibrant, I hope vibrant, theater center, which are open for many other theatrical philosophies, styles, aesthetics. That's what makes us very, very solid and strong, facing, and I'm very, very glad now to greet and to say hello to Tobias Biancone, because we are facing, I hope I'm not making now any something which should be still hidden, facing together with Shanghai to have a program and run the program as a UNESCO ITI Capital of Performing Arts 2022. Complexity of this program as well is very, very much connected with the very theme of this conference. Because if we want to be a world capital of performing arts, it's absolutely clear that we couldn't just stay or be locked with our own productions or our own world of theater. We have not only operate worldwide, but we have as well changed the tectonic of our fields of activity. What now the pandemic time gave us as a great lesson and opportunity. And I think this is one of the key moments when we speak not only about theater practitioners, but as well about critics, scholars, that all of us, we are placed in the same corner. We are all disarmed. Our pencils are on the table back. But what I want to say, positive, not negative, this situation when we are out of zone of our comfort is a very creative moment. As a persons, we are suffering because this situation is really covering covers all of the world, our families, our personal life. But as a creators, we, in the situation out of zone of comfort, we start to invent, to spark completely new ideas, and especially we start to feel and to understand new ways and new tools of our partnership. I feel really, really, this is what happened in my institution. Of course, we are very friendly related. We have very good moods of communication. We talk to each other by name. It's very significant. Octavian asked me, sorry, Octavian, to change my description of my name from Jarek to Jarosław. Even we know very well this is the same, and Octavian introduced me by Jarek. Yes, please, do this abbreviation, use it more. use it often, warmer. That's what happened between all of us inside my institution and in the world scale. Our partnership, we understand now, much deeper, much subtle, much human. Will be it fruitful for theater? Of course, yes. Just right now, Octavian introducing Constantine and introducing me was telling about theater, which is based on the human truth and human trust. Without this two, with them two, the trust and the truth, theater or humanist art will never exist. Since we are out of our comfort zone, professional zones, professionalism, because pandemic questioned it in the very good sense, because pandemic time questioned it equally, absolutely everyone has to answer to it. I believe there is this crisis will be for theater very, 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 very fruitful. And so I don't want to take your time more. I'm absolutely fascinated by this what Octavian wrote in the letter, the call and the opening letter for the conference, yeah, with this very large vision, and asking us, do we notice this big change that, which of course we feel, we understand, we understood since many years, but now there is no more time to speak in the theater field about exclusive or fields which are seeing each other like that. Yeah, everything is much, much closer and as an almost infinitive change. There is one, by the end, I want to say the one particular word which for me combines every practice and is important for every practitioner. The word is a word how with a question mark. The notion of how, not only know how, but how is a notion of quality, notion of the standard. I think is very important for every practitioner. And this question, how good, or how to do it, let's say, at how I'm doing, of course, will remains with us. And I hope it will be the only question which keep us separate as a people of a craft, of a special practice, practitioners of words, practitioners of logos incorporated, like actors. But the notion of how will stay with us and keep us not separate, keep us again unified with this infinitive chain of this and that and that and that and that. Thank you so much, Octavian, for inviting me. I'm here rather to listen and to have a really pleasure, especially that yes, soon I want to have you here, to welcome you on the ground, on the land of Wrocław. If not in 2021, in 2022, as Wrocław as a ITI UNESCO Performing Arts Capital. Thank you so much, and I'm listening to you.
Thank you so much, Jarek, for everything that you have said, for this genuine sense of sharing your ideas and your ideals with everybody. And thank you for your friendship, and thank you for your faith in what theater means. It has been rather reassuring to learn that your projects are continuing, that you're not giving up, and that you're inviting us to be there in Wrocław, this place that means so much for the history of theater and the theater culture. And it was almost ironical that somewhere in the background was the face of Antonin Artaud, the prophet and the martyr of modern theater, who never got to be this, let alone this and that and that. But we know that he was everything because he believed in what theater could be in an ideal sense. And I think there is a certain connection between Artaud and Grotowski on the one hand, and between Grotowski and you on the other hand. And I'd like to say once again that I'm grateful to you for the effort to join us today and to be the first keynote of the conference. Now we start the program as such with the paper presentations, although the word paper and the word presentation might not be adequate for something that happens online. And that's because we need to move past these fixtures of what a conference is supposed to be. And it's indeed the prerogative of an online event. It's a little bit more flexible. It's a little bit more relaxed. And I will allow myself to say something from that point of view about the first speaker, Professor Manabu Noda from Tokyo, from Meiji University. He's at once a great scholar, a wonderful, fantastic, and highly regarded theater critic of Japan, but he is also, and I insist upon this, a translator, an interpreter. When Simon McBurney went to Tokyo, Manabu worked closely with him. When some important theater artists from Japan, such as Hideki Noda, go to places in Europe or the United States, Manabu is there. And through translation, he creates the possibilities of dialogue. And he has been the ambassador at large of Japanese theater. And I feel very, very fortunate to be able to call him my friend and to introduce him in the context of our event. So Manabu, now it's the time for you to talk about the artist that I've just mentioned, Hideki Noda, who really is somebody with multiple identities, because in his shows, he is the playwright, the director, the actor, and the producer. And he's the element that glues everything into a coherent form. So Manabu Noda from Meiji University in Tokyo.
Thank you for having me. Can I share the slides with you all?
Yes.
Okay. So it is my great pleasure. Thank you for having me, first of all, and it is my great pleasure to be able to talk about what's my. Sorry. I talk about Hideki Noda and his work. So I'm going to talk about his Q, A Night at the Kabuki, premiered in 2019 at the Tokyo Metropolitan Theater. Hideki Noda was born in 1955. He is the artistic director of the theater, Tokyo Metropolitan Theater. And Q, A Night at the Kabuki, is his latest original play so far. As usual for him, he not only wrote and directed it, but also acted in it. Before moving on to this play, being this and that, let me first point out that Noda himself has always been a theater artist in so many shoes. Ever since he started his company Yume no Yuminsha in 1976, he has been this and that, a playwright, an actor performing his own plays, and director directing almost all his plays. Noda's Q, A Night at the Opera, also has many faces. It is a tribute to the legendary rock band Queen with the band's approval. The play uses a song from Queen's album, A Night at the Opera, their fourth album released in 1975, and the fact is also reflected in the title of the play itself. Among them, Love of My Life is played more than once, which is suitable for the play's theme because it is a radical makeover of Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, a recast in the context of The Tale of the Heike, the Japanese classic epic, sorry, purportedly compiled before 1330. The tale recounts the war in the late 12th century between the Taira and the Minamoto clans for control of Japan. Now, Q, A Night at the Kabuki, also taps the Kabuki tradition. The opening scene quotes the Kabuki piece Shunkan. Shunkan, this one. It is the story of the eponymous high-rank Buddhist monk exiled to a remote island. In the closing scene, Shunkan, being the only one unforgiven, has to see off the others now pardoned and allowed to board the return ship. In Noda's play, we see a man in poor health see off those pardoned in the same way. We will see that his name is Romeo soon, and that the play looks back on the ordeal of Japan's POWs, or prisoners of wars, detained after World War II in the former Soviet Union. Q, A Night at the Kabuki, is made of 2 acts. In the first, the tale of the young star-crossed lovers is enacted by Romeo of the Taras and the Juliet of the Minamoto. The Tara clan are hedonistic powermongers with huge wealth, while the Minamoto clan are more stoic and Spartan, biding their time to beat the rival Taras and gain control of the country. Okay, the play has another pair of lovers, as you see in the picture. Romeo thereafter and Juliet thereafter. In the first act, they are ghost doubles to the younger pair, half invisible to others but communicable to their former selves. They try to stall the tragic action from being reenacted by intervening in the course of action. Now, in the second act, the role reverses. The thereafter pair are the Romeo and Juliet who were still alive after the Shakespearean course of events, being observed by the ghostly younger pair. The thereafters have survived the tragedy only to live eternal separation. Romeo thereafter departs for the front in the war between the 2 clans out of desperation, but not as the heir of the Tyra clan, but in disguise as a common soldier, casting his true name. His side loses the war, and Romeo is detained in the labor camp far away from home, while Juliet thereafter also leaves home because of the marriage order from her father, who now has the Minamoto clan. She enters a convent, which was her choice between bigamy and the go to a nunnery option. She leaves home in search of Romeo as a battlefield nurse. She succeeds in finding Romeo, but has to conceal her identity to conceal Romeo's identity. While Romeo, shell-shocked and temporarily blind, does not recognize her. The feel of the nurse's gentle touch was all that's left in the hand of Romeo in his makeshift bed. The dire result of refusing the true name is that Romeo thereafter cannot be repatriated because his fake name is not on the list of the pardoned. Just like the letter which does not reach Romeo in the Shakespearean original, the letters between the thereafter Romeo and Juliet in separation do not reach each other, except one. The last and only message that did reach Juliet had to be delivered orally 30 years later by a messenger to avoid censorship. Just as Biwa Hoshi were traditional lay priests and often blind performers in Japan recount the tale of the heike, the messenger in the play delivers the message out of memory. It is the dying message from Romeo still in a foreign land where he was held captive as a POW in the place called Siberia, which sounds very much like Siberia. The ending of the message goes like this in my translation. Bring it back, the strength I had when I loved you. Don't forget me, though I am immensely far away from home, lying like a rotten log in the wintry wasteland, awaiting death. Please, please do not bury me nameless. Do not recall me, even with tears in eyes, like an unknown soldier. Never tell me again to refuse my name. I used to have a name, Romeo. Don't take it away from me when I die here. From Romeo to Juliet with all my love. Now, by the time the play comes to this scene, the audience has seen paper planes flying to and fro in the air more than once, as if to accentuate the play. They fly again in this scene, and this time they do not look like battle aircrafts, but so many undelivered letters between the two lovers. Queen's Love of My Life, the anthem of the play, is played for the last time to close the play. So notice Kill, A Night at the Kabuki, does not come in the two-act format of the first time as tragedy, the second time as farce. It is more like the first time as tragedy, the second time as tragedy again, but even more tragic, leaving a Beckettchian aftertaste on the palate. The play was an attempt to recoup the experiences of so many married couples separated due to the war by opening the story of the two famous star-crossed lovers to the general people who are anonymous. The Q in the title not only stands for Queen, but also an allusion to QAnon, ironical allusion, of course, and with a beautiful twist. Even more notable is the use of the live version of Queen's Love of My Life in the second act. The 1985 version in Rio de Janeiro, Argentina, recording the unison of the entire anonymous audience, tens of thousands of them, in the vast arena, as if to embrace this song altogether, and by so doing, open it to the reservoir of communal memory. The play does just that, opening up the love tragedy of the world famous status to the anonymous. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Manabu. Thank you for covering a topic that I think is essential to our conversation, because it involves the personality and the work of a major contemporary Japanese artist who is this and that at the same time. Thank you. And I'm now going to invite Bernice to introduce our next speaker, although I would have a lot to say about him as well, because he's a friend and a very, very important public intellectual from Bangkok, Thailand. But I think it is time for me to share this experience of introducing guests with our co-host and wonderful Hong Kong organizer of the event, Bernice Chan.
Hello, everyone. I have to take this opportunity to thank Octavian to let us IATC Hong Kong to have this opportunity to co-host this event. And Pawi, nice to see you online. And I met Pawi a few years ago in an IATC Congress. And afterwards, we do have a lot of chance to, Pawi will come to Hong Kong like every year, I think, for two or three times. But during the pandemic, we will not be able to see each other, but still we can meet him online. And Pawi is a scholar. He was chairperson of Department of Dramatic Arts in the Chulalongkorn University, and he changed his track of being the director of Bangkok Arts, Culture and Culture Center later on. And of course, Pawi is not only a scholar and curator, he also is a, to me, he's an arts observer as well. Of course, he's a theater critic. So Pawi, over to you, and I'm looking forward to learn from you, from your presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. On behalf of IATC Thailand, I'd like to thank IATC Hong Kong, as well as Octavian and all the co-organizers who have organized this event, so that our critics colleagues can come together today and tomorrow. Okay, I continue to my presentation. Okay. Yes. So is something wrong? Is it backward? Oh, it's good. Okay. So it's good. All right. Okay. Because I see
it's
it.
Okay.
It's okay. Right. Okay. The topic of my presentation is blurring the boundaries and reconnecting the arts, living and working together in the now normal Bangkok. And I put the noun in quotation marks intentionally, because I prefer like now normal to a new normal, because it feels that we don't have to adapt ourselves, even though we do have to adapt a lot in this unusual times. I think among the many lessons the current global pandemic has taught us is that we should always be or remain inclusive, okay, rather than exclusive, okay. And I have a personal experience, like and opinion on this. Thailand was among the not many countries who was able to control the spread of the coronavirus for many months until recently, when we had a second wave, even though the government preferred to call it a new wave rather than second, and I don't know the difference, but that's political. Okay, and that's mainly because our friends from Myanmar who are working in many industries have migrated illegally into the country, and their living conditions in Thailand is unfortunately very poor, so they are very prone to the virus. And so now I checked this afternoon. Today we have 800 new cases of infection, and I think if we were, to be more aware of what's happening around us, we could have taken a good example from Singapore and learned the lesson that they have in terms of foreign workers. Then next, okay. I think the lesson that I learned, and I'm sure I'm not the only one, from the pandemic, is that we should always see how people, places, and things are interconnected. Okay, and I think that they may not appear to be so on the surface, and many people have tried to segregate one from another by categorizing and labeling them. And I think in many countries that are successful in controlling the virus, you can see a lot of task force or committee being set up, and these task force would usually comprise people from different fields. You have military people, you have policemen, you have medical doctors, you have public care people, you have scientists, you have technologists, you have artists as well. And I think the more diverse this group are, the more successful policies and plans they can come up with. And we have already seen many examples. As we all know, theater is a composite art, and theater artists almost always work with colleagues with different artistic backgrounds. Okay, playwright work with a director, with the costume designer, a set designer, lighting designer. Of course, some playwrights do direct as well and do act, but then, well, he have to work with a manager, he have to work with the audience as well, and we have to work with the designers. He cannot do anything like by himself or by herself. And so I think it's natural for theater people, like per se, to be inclusive and to be in the collaboration or cooperation mode all the time. And if you look at the theater audiences, and theater spectatorship is, of course, as in many different genres of arts, spectatorship is the one of the least studied and often overlooked area. I think many theater audiences are film goers as well, avid film goers, museum visitors, and music aficionados as well. Because like when they go to see theater, they see like all of these arts in the theater production anyway. And I think also we all know that boundaries among disciplines of contemporary arts continue to blur, and the speed of blurring varies, interestingly, like from one country to another. And a lot of people say that the definition of contemporary art or contemporary theater or contemporary music or contemporary literature would likewise vary from one country to another. And I think many theater collectives, companies, and festivals have renamed themselves, okay, to better reflect the nature of their works. Recently, I have found that Theatre Works, an important performing arts collective in Singapore, have renamed itself as T-Works to show that they are now doing more interdisciplinary work, for example. Okay. And accordingly, like white cubes, okay, as we know in visual arts, have become black boxes, okay, and vice versa. And here are some examples from Bangkok Art and Culture Center. Briefly, it's 25,000 square meter multidisciplinary cultural center in the heart of Bangkok, with hundreds of programs in like visual arts exhibitions, music program, theater, film, discussion, talks, children's program year round. And this, some of you may probably know, Pichet Kranchun Dance Company. He was at one of the main galleries of a BACC in 2019 when I was a director. And he occupied the gallery, the 1,000 square meter gallery, for 4 days. And he did performance, he did workshops, and he did some artworks. And he invite audience or museum visitors to join him as well. Okay. Another example is our exhibition. It's a BACC exhibition in collaboration with International Exchange Program, Executive Committee for Disabled People's Culture and Arts. It's an art brut program. And from the very beginning, we planned, I mean, not only the visual arts presentation, but also performance. And here are some of the examples of the performance that were presented there. We had BACC had a performance festival that works all year round. We had an open call, and this young playwright called Patricia Purpongsakorn proposed a new play that she would direct, and it was written by the lady performer on the right, who is visually challenged, and she wrote and also performed in this play. And then there's another music theater performance by another professor at Mahidol University, Napisi Reyes, which talks about also a visually challenged pianist who was her student, called Neil's Vision. And then there were some performances by physically challenged artists from Japan, for example, Salsakam Tape and Zuho Taiko, and Welcome to Walmart, a play by Freedom Theatre from Japan. And then there's another, almost concurrently, is another exhibition, which is an art therapy exhibition called Art of Element and Therapy. And within this exhibition, within the gallery space, we set up a small room, white cube, white box, yeah, to set up an art therapy performance. So in these weekend performances, professional art therapists in different fields, music therapists, movement therapists, like for example, would work with a professional actor. A professional actor would perform as someone who has a problem, and then he would consult, would come for a professional consultation. So the audience watch this, pay for a ticket to watch this, watch how like an actual therapist works in different disciplines of arts. And almost concurrently with these two exhibitions, the art brut and the art therapy exhibition, we had this contemporary Thai art exhibition called RIF, Thai Contemporary Artistic Practices in Transition, which highlight works of 13 visual arts masters from the 1980s to 2000s. But this has nothing to do with the performing arts, despite the name. And as a result, okay, of course, like government is always interested in numbers, right? So 3 festivals going on almost at the same time: art therapy, Art Brut, and then contemporary Thai arts. As a result, number of visitors.
Harry, sorry to interrupt. Maybe one more minute.
Sure. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. So, in other words, I think in terms of the audience connect more when it's not like only like one specific genre of art. And I think this, I mean, this also support my point earlier. Now, in terms of 2020, I mean the pandemic year, there's another work by Pichet Kanchun Dance Company called Number 60, premiere at TPAM, Tokyo Performing Arts Market in Yokohama, also presented at the Taipei Arts Festival after 14-day quarantine. It's a performance, okay, but it is also a lecture performance, okay, and also an exhibition. Okay, so here are the possibilities. So in conclusions, we all know that Amazon, okay, is not just a US online bookstore. Virgin is not just a UK record company anymore. Grab is not just a Malaysian ride-hailing application anymore. And Xiaomi is not just a Chinese mobile phone company anymore. Here's Xiaomi, okay, and it's not a mobile phone. So, is IATC just a network of international theater critics? Okay. Okay, I think possibilities are limitless. We just have to keep our minds, ears, eyes, and mouths too. Okay, open. It's 2021 already. Thank you very much, and belated Happy New Year.
Thank you so much, Perry. Thank you so much. And of course, we have already learned a lot from your presentation, this and that and that. And I would like to introduce our next paper presenter, Benny Lim. Benny is an educator, theologist, and a cultural mediator. And he is currently a visiting scholar of cultural studies with the Chinese University of Hong Kong. And Benny, I know he's very busy for the week because I have already attended a few online meetings hosted by Benny. And I'm so looking forward to have another chance to learn from Benny. And Benny is going to share a topic with us. Theater critics are always this and that and that. Over to you, Benny.
Yeah, hello everyone. Yeah, I'm Benny Lim from the Chinese University of Hong Kong. I'm originally from Singapore. So my topic today is theater critics are always this and that and that. Now here I may seem to be suggesting that theater critics have three roles, right? This and then that and that. But actually it's more than that if you follow me. Like first and foremost, theater critics are of course critics. A critic is by definition, I mean dictionary definition, a person who judges the merits of literary or artistic works. And in this case, I'm really referring to theater works, especially one who does so professionally. Now, critics are welcome to have their own opinions and ideas about a piece of theater work. A critic translates his or her ideas through writing, dialogues, conversations, podcasts. Podcast is getting very popular. And of course, on any other social media platforms. Now, a few years back, I was speaking alongside Octavian in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia in a public forum on the issues of theater criticism. And then Octavian and I could still meet in person. I mean, I've not seen Octavian for a long time. And in fact, we went for durians thereafter. And I should note that both Octavian and I were in Malaysia back then because our work has brought us there and also to many other places. And in the forum, I proposed the idea that theater critics should work on building their social and cultural capital so that they could distinguish themselves. So this point relates to the second half of the definition I brought up earlier, one who does so professionally. How does one become a critic professionally? This could be done through so many ways, more so during this pandemic, perhaps, some of which are more relevant to some people, while some may be a little bit far-fetched. Now, for example, critics could enhance their social and or cultural capital through gaining knowledge of theater, continue to pursue higher education in theater studies, become theater practitioners themselves, can direct shows, write shows, become theater academics. We have to connect with other critics or engage in conversation or become pracademics, as I said sometimes, a practitioner turned academic. Of course, they could also work towards becoming a well-known newspaper or media outlet as a journalist, responsible for art reporting, become a social media influencer. Of course, this is very difficult. And, and through the platform, discuss about theater. And the list goes on and on. The main point here is the critic is a critic, and at the same time, someone else. Whether the critic is also an academic, a journalist, a social media influencer, it does not quite matter. What matters is that the critic needs to be someone else in order to become professional or to be a professional critic. And this idea was further developed into an article I wrote and subsequently published by Bernice in IATC Hong Kong. But that's not all. I propose that theater critics should also become cultural mediators. Now, I look at cultural mediation from a cultural studies perspective. And being cultural mediators, they must be aware and sensitive to the existing cultural ecologies and developments. And in this case, I'm talking about theater ecosystem and the emerging practices, the emerging theater practices. And of course, cultural mediators must also be very sensitive to the power relations that lie within the theater ecosystem and these emerging practices. Now, only with this knowledge can critique truly be critical, and only when they are truly critical that their criticism would be constructive and responsible. And in my opinion, cultural mediators navigate between different issues and situations and try to make sense and bridge the various stakeholders together. In a way, a cultural mediator, or now I'm proposing a critic being a cultural mediator, a critic is a wanderer, someone who wanders around in a constant state of deferment because issues are never ending and new issues will arise. So a critic is this and that, but the final that is in a constant state of deferment. Now, let me give you a personal example. In my early days as a theater practitioner in Singapore, I received criticisms for my directorial works consistently over a few years. In the early 2000s, that's about 20 years ago when I was practicing, when I was a theater practitioner. Now, my shows were accused of using bad actors, delivering bad acting. Now, honestly, I really do not think that they were that bad. But more so, it was actually my mission at that point in time, as a young director myself, 20 years ago, I was a lot younger, to work with young actors because there weren't that many opportunities, especially taking on lead roles, important roles for these young actors back then. Now, Singapore's English theater scene took off in the 1980s. I mean, really took off in the 1980s. And the pioneering actors then were thrown into all sorts of learning opportunities. They were given important roles straight away. So they grew and developed into what critics call good actors because of the steep learning curve that they went through. But 20 years later, I mean, in early 2000s, 20 years after the 1980s, the situation was no longer the same. The pioneer actors were still taking on all the leading roles, and the younger actors do not have the chance to grow. Then I fear a widening gap between the actors of different generations. And I remember I even wrote about this situation and published in the theater magazine. So what I'm saying is that while the criticism about bad acting did have some truth in it, I mean, maybe they're young and their acting was really not so good. There was a bigger issue, which is really about the state of the actors' development in Singapore within the entire theater ecosystem back in Singapore at that point in time. And that warranted further discussions. Hence, I think that criticism, that was presented to me were neither constructive and they were also not responsible. That is, they failed to take on the role as a cultural mediator. So in conclusion, a very short presentation, theater critics are first and foremost critics, which is this. But they are also someone else that distinguish them from others. As I mentioned, it could be a social media influencer, an academic, a practitioner, and that's that. But finally, they are also taking on the role as cultural mediators, the final that. And this final role, at least to me, is in a constant state of wondering and deferring. So this and that and that, and this, the final that is moving on and on, that and that and that and that and that. Okay, with that, I end my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Benny. Thank you. You have really enriched our knowledge of what theater criticism can be. And it's fascinating that you've done so from the perspective of a practitioner and a academic, but not as a critic per se. And I think it's really, really interesting that sometimes you gain knowledge of a subject matter or of a field from without, rather than being always fixed within. So I like to say thank you for all these different perspectives that are really, really exciting to consider. Indeed, as a theater critic, I am this, but I am that and that. And the last that might not actually be yet available for me, but might be happening sometime in the future. And I think it's that perspective that we should all cherish. So thank you very much. And I'd like to say that taking my cue from you, the person who will be chairing the next session is really a cultural mediator. He is a professor of theater and English literature at Thessaloniki University. He is the editor-in-chief of Critical Stages, Scène Critique, the journal of the International Association of Theater Critics. He is a curator involved in the programming of Dimitria Festival in Thessaloniki, but he is involved in so many ecosystems at the same time that overlap, and yet they remain distinct. I'm talking about my wonderful special friend Savas Patsalidis, who was generous enough to become a partner in this event from the very beginning. And I am so pleased that Critical Stages is, together with IATC Hong Kong, CBU International Festival, and ITI, whose representative and general director, Tobias Biancone, is with us today, one of the key organizers of this event. So Savas, now it is your turn to chair the next session. Thank you.
Thank you, Octavian. Thank you all for spending time to listen to us, and hello to all friends around the world. I know most of you. Just a couple of cliche words, ideas before I introduce you to our next 4 speakers from 3 different countries. Well, the first cliche idea I have in my mind is that everything changes. And the only thing that does not change is change itself. So we live in a world of a constant transition. And I think that what is intimidating in our times is that the speed of this transition. I mean, things go past us too fast. And we barely have time to reflect, to pause and reflect on what is going on. And I'm glad that Octavian came up with this idea, this and that idea, in order to pause for a while and reflect on what is going on around us, to make sense out of things and out of these constant crossings of borders, crossing of genders, crossing of genres, crossing of roles, of aesthetics, of definitions. Everywhere we have crossings, and everywhere we have displacements and repositionings. So this and that instead of this or that. I mean, this inclusive idea of this and that opens up the spectrum of our search, but at the same time, it turns the ground we move on very slippery. And we have to be very careful, because we might easily embrace the idea of anything goes. And there it is a major challenge that we are asked to confront. Are there any limits? Who sets the limits? Anything goes. So the question is this: are artists, are critics prepared to face this slippery moment by producing enlightening art? So, well, this is, as I said, a brief introduction, and then allow me now to turn to the speakers of of this session, beginning with a good friend of ours, Octavian's, Manapu's friend, everybody's friend, is Michel Bais, who is a general secretary of IATC for many, many years. If my memory does not fail me, Michel probably spent some 20 years of his life chairing with professionalism this huge organization, association of ours. He holds a PhD from Paris, and for many years he was the editor-in-chief of very a quality theater journal published in Quebec, Je. We all know that Michel is a fan of Robert Lepage theater. And so we have to, although Michel is not with us now, it's 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning in Quebec, and he vetoed his 7-minute presentation of Robert Lepage. So I'll ask Bernice if she could take care of that right now. Thank you very much. We'll be back later on.
Robert Lepage and his multiple identities. As we all know, Lepage is an artist of many talents. He's not the first one nor the only one who expresses himself by playing different roles on stage, and not only on a stage. But few others have been so and more systematic. Better known as an innovative director working with international groups of actors in several languages and in many countries, Lepage often creates plays which he writes himself, or to be more precise, which he usually elaborates with his actors, from Circulation and the Dragon Trilogy, in the 1980s, to The Seven Branches of River Ota in 1994, a play revived in 2020, and to the more recent Lip Sync and Jeu de Cartes. In fact, Lepage became a master of collective creations. Of course, we know that he is also renowned for his notable mise en scène of classical plays by Shakespeare, which he mounted namely in London, Fernando de Rojas in Madrid, Strindberg, which he mounted in Stockholm, or plays by Brecht, Dürrenmatt, etc. He's also famous for directing operas in several countries, dance shows like Eonagata, in which he danced himself with Sylvie Guillem in Spain, circus shows for Le Cirque du Soleil in Las Vegas, rock shows with Peter Gabriel, or more recently his musical show Slav, which was censored on opening day in Montreal under accusations of so-called cultural appropriation. We must not forget that Lepage has also directed movies and acted in films produced by others. Finally, he touched almost all aspects of performing arts. He once directed a show for children, Comment devenir parfait en 3 jours, and also a light and sound show in Quebec City, Le Moulin à Images. I would not be surprised to find out that he already worked with puppets. What other performing arts exist? Storytelling, performance art, obviously, there is room left for new challenges. The fact that Lepage speaks several languages surely helps his tentacular activity. Besides French and English, he masters Italian and Spanish, and he gets along in Japanese, German, and Swedish. Learning a new language is something natural for him. He even played at least one of his solos in Rome in Italian. But while he loves to work with artists and other theater practitioners, Lepage also likes to create stage designs, to play with light effects and projections, but most of all, he likes to be on stage himself. He told me once that it would be unfair for his actors to cast himself in one of his shows, because he is so busy that it would be impossible for the group to tour the show, and he would feel guilty. This is the reason why, every now and then, when inspiration knocks at his door, Lepage creates a new solo show. He wants to keep practicing as an actor. As I said, he's not the only one. When Lepage created his Hamlet collage, Elsener, in 1995, Bob Wilson had just created his own solo adaptation of Hamlet. But Lepage created many more solo shows, which he has been touring himself, and which other Quebec actors have also toured for many years after him throughout the world, in French and in English. Needles and Opium, The Far Side of the Moon, The Anderson Project. However, his last solo, 887, is so personal that it's hard to see how another actor could play young Robert himself, his parents, his sister, and all the surrounding where he grew up. It seems that the only play in which Lepage played with other actors is Quills in 2016, based on the story of the last days of the Marquis de Sade, a play by Doug Wright. The main role was powerfully played by Lepage, who, in the jail of Charenton, continues to produce scandalous writings which are being censored by removing his paper, his pen, and finally depriving Marquis de Sade of all his clothes and cutting his tongue because he shouts his texts aloud. At the end, Lepage appears crawling on the floor of the jail, naked, bald, even without his usual wig, and continues to write on the walls of his prison with his blood and even with his excrement as Marquis de Sade. Although this production could not tour as much as other ones, it was still presented in many cities of Canada and France. As we can see, Lepage proves to be more and more a master of all performing arts. Another example, his house in the suburbs of Quebec City is close to a First Nation settlement on the shore of Rivière Saint-Charles. And since he saw so many of these Huron-Wendat people, we used to say Indians before, passing on canoes in front of his house, he offered to join them and created the choreography of a canoe show. This gave him the idea to mount Shakespeare's Tempest with some of them in this community called Wendake. In his new theatre, Le Diamant, in the heart of Quebec City, Lepage was aiming to reviving some shows of his repertory, which could still be invited for touring, like his first solo, Vinci, about Leonardo da Vinci. These projects have been, of course, put on pause during the pandemic, but are not abandoned. In fact, Le Diamant had opened for only 6 months last year, but it took 10 years to build the theatre. In a couple of weeks, on February 13, Le Diamant will be offering a benefit show online to raise funds, which will help produce shows when theaters reopen. You're, of course, welcome to buy a ticket at $100. Oh yes, one category of new shows which we will be able to see in Le Diamant will be professional wrestling shows. According to Lepage, this is a type of performing art which has been neglected for too long. So he went to wrestling shows with his father when he was a kid. And in fact, his father, who was a taxi driver, had some professional wrestlers as usual customers. Lepage also seems to appreciate critics who are interested in the various dimensions of his work, not only as pure critics, but as persons who can interact with artists. When he received the Europe Prize for Theatre in 2007, he was happy to share his views with critics, and in my article published in Critical Stages, Scène Critique, number 10 in 2014, 4 questions à Robert Lepage sur la critique, he claims that not only does he read reviews, but he is influenced by them. Since most of his shows are works in progress, he makes a lot of changes after the first performance, and in doing this, he finds valuable to follow the opinion of some critics. So, if artists are changing, critics are changing too. It is possible that the pandemic will make this more obvious in the future, since doing theatre in the old way and criticism, as was the case in the past, seems to be no more possible in 2021. Thank you. Merci.
Thank you, Michel, for this enlightening speech, presentation of Lepage work, and also for your last constructive comments on the future of criticism. Yes, criticism cannot be the same. It has to readjust because there are too many things happening around us. Let me just go on now to our next speaker. This time I'll take you to Russia. It's Emilia Dementova. She's a fellow critic, researcher, and creative writer, and also a PhD holder from Lomonosov Moscow State University. Emilia raises a couple of interesting questions about the state of contemporary criticism. She talks about the director-auteur and tries to figure out the difference between an auteur, a post-auteur, and a neo-auteur. What are the criteria for defining authorship, and how is this concept put into practice? So let's listen to Emilia's presentation and how she deals with these pretty interesting and complicated concepts.
Hello, dear colleagues. I hope all of you are in a good health and doing well. Unfortunately, today I cannot be with you online the whole day. That's why I decided to record a short video for you. So my theme is the terminological difficulties involved with defining the status of a theater director. This is one of the topics of my scientific interests, and today I will try to put into a nutshell some main points. And I'd like to say thank you to all the organizers of this conference for this opportunity. The logic of the language argues with the logic of the theater criticism, in which the words author, creator, storyteller of the play can mean both the director and the author of the text. So in theater criticism today, we need to highlight a new classification of the directors whose will and purpose are spread to all the elements of the performance. So film critics Andrew Saris, as you see, offered a system of the concentric circles to define the concept of the author. So the inner circle indicates the level of the professional level, technical skills and basic competences, because a great director has to at least be a good director. The middle circle is the director's personal style, and the outer circle, as defined by Saris, characterizes the presence of the interior meaning. So most directors don't advance beyond the first circle, which doesn't deprive them from the status of the professionals. So some of their colleagues are stuck in the middle, and they can be called stylists, and only a few manage to reach the third circle, and earn the right to be named author. In one of his lectures, Saris mentioned that the term neo-author, along with the term post-author, not given the definition of these terms, but he told that there is a change in tectonic plates in the approach to art, because when people were tired of modernism at one time, it was replaced by the postmodernism and neo-modernism. So in 2015, within the framework of the International Cultural Forum in the St. Petersburg, a discussion about the author and post-author theater took place. And as an example of the post-auteurism was the situation in which the director can transfer a significant part of his rights to a composer, set designer, etc. An example of such performance, for example, was the case of the Valeris Fokin Masquerade, in which the director co-authored Всеволод Meyerhold, as if extending the his author's production. So it was suggested that the theater of the post-auteur is a situation in which the modern director became a co-author of a classic and based on his work, or director's script creates his own play or performance with elements of theatrical reconstruction. So in my opinion, this term post-auteurism is not successful, firstly because the posthumous character of the contemporary authorship extracted from the texts of Roland Barthes and Michel Foucault, and secondly this definition is already used in musicology and describes the modern non-composer music such as techno music and electronic music and so on and so forth. So we can say that directors exist today in another socio-cultural situation, and that's why the concept of the neo-auteur may become more appropriate to describe this new situation. And the neo-auteurism approach suggests that the director, in addition to his film or performance, creates a certain added value. So you know that today directors are fully involved in the advertising process of the promotion of his film or performance through the social networks, media, participation in festival conferences and other forms of public promotion. And author today, in my opinion, become a marketing category, a label which is actively, but not always deservedly, assigned or distributed to the directors. And this is a kind of trophy, in my point of view, or the element of packaging of the performance or the film, or it's just a category of the status in the hierarchy of the social values, in my opinion. But I will try to highlight the main distinguishing features of the characteristics of the neo-auteur. First of all, is the work. The director neo-auteur must produce a significant part of his work, which demonstrates his personal author's personality. The next one is the artistic control. The third is the fact that neo-author's approach puts in the field of the research also a complex picture of the relationship. So I mean that the context of the piece of art, of the performance, is no less important than the director's intentions. Also, the neo-author's approach focuses attention not only on the value of the piece of art, but on the value of the experience of interacting with it. And the main thing is the factor of the process. So, and this is the main difference from the original author theory. The neo-author's approach is characterized by attention not only to the result of the activity of the director, but also to the period of existence of his performance or film and development of his work, as well as on the influence of the culture of the society, for example. Of course, the phenomenon of the neo-author raises additional questions, but it's important not only from the point of view of the theater studies, but also from the point of view of the law, because, you know, from the point of view of the Russian law, the director doesn't hold the legal copyright, and the author denotes exclusively the author of the literary basis of the performance. So after all, I should say that each new date constructs theater anew, tunes it in a new key and to a new emotional wave, and therefore ultimately the spectator remains the unique and the main author of the performance, not in the sense of the theater criticism, of course, but in an everyday sense. And without a viewer, theater loses itself and loses its meaning. However, this conference proves that, fortunately enough for all of us, nothing looks set to threaten theater. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Emilia, for this most interesting look into the problematics and the poetics of authorship. This is an interesting concept because it takes us back to Elizabethan times. If we really want to have the starting stages of authorship, where the director was more or less doing everything that. Anyway, it could be interesting to look at this concept through this historical perspective some other time. Probably in a discussion that might follow. Now, let me introduce you to our third speaker, and I will move from Russia to Greece, northern Greece. And the next speaker is a young poetess and critic and a member of the Hellenic Association of Critics. Is Ioanna Lucia, and Ioanna, in her own paper, somehow continues the discussion that Emilia has launched about artistic creation as a kind of critical writing, which is again is another beautiful and pretty interesting concept. And I am curious, we are curious to listen to Ioanna's understanding of this concept. Ioanna?
Hello to everyone. I'm very glad to be part of this interesting conference. T.S. Eliot once wrote that the artist is within his own limitations, often is to be dependent upon as a critic. His criticism will be criticism and not the satisfaction of a suppressed creative wish, which in most other persons is apt to interfere fatally. Similarly, there is a joke circulating in theatrical venues in my country, maybe in yours too, that satirizes the repressed creativity of critics, saying that he who cannot be an actor becomes a director, and whoever does not succeed as a director either becomes a critic. This is probably not only a popular saying of people, but echoes similar views expressed at times from intellectuals too, such as Gustave Flaubert, who once said that a man is a critic when he cannot be an artist, in the same way that a man becomes an informer when he cannot be a soldier. But how many times in the history of mankind did not the one on the battlefield need to be himself also the messenger of good or bad news? Maintaining Flaubert's analogy, how many times has the artist not been the one to critique specific work of art or art in general? Perhaps the first to do so was Aristophanes. His comedy, The Frogs, is more or less a critique of his contemporary tragic drama. God Dionysus descends to the underworld to organize dramatic battles between Aeschylus and Euripides and to resurrect the winner. Of course, Aristophanes' references and allusions to his contemporary dramatic poets are many in his other plays too. Shakespeare does something similar in his Hamlet, when in the second scene of the third act, Hamlet gives instructions to the actors for the show they are going to present in front of his mother and the new king. His advice, however, does not only concern those on scene, but is addressed to all the actors. Apart from these cases in which artists, through their work, express criticism, there are also those cases where the engagement of criticism coexists and predisposes, even prepares, one could say, the artistic creation. As Theodor Adorno argued in 1966 in Negative Dialectics, the key to any art content lies in its technique. So when you want to interpret an art piece or to evaluate it, it is very likely that you will find yourself on, let's call it, the opposite side of criticism, that is in creation. As an example, I mention here the case of the multifaceted Bertolt Brecht, who was both a theoretician and a practitioner of theater. Brecht began his career while also writing theater reviews for Der Volksspiel. However, the most representative case of the position I rest today comes from cinema, and specifically from the group of 5 critics of Cahiers du Cinéma magazine, which circulated from 1959 to 1966. This group, consisting of Éric Rohmer, Jacques Rivest, Jean-Luc Godard, Claude Chabrol, and François Truffaut, outraged by the situation prevailing in French cinema at the time, decided to take matters into their own hands and direct their own films according to what they proposed in their critical texts. This is how the so-called Nouvelle Vague was born in 1959, while the magazine continued to publish, hosting their texts. This group very appropriately used the phrase camera stylo, first introduced by Alexander Astrik in 1948. Extending the use of this term, we would say that the camera is not only the medium that records, but it is transformed into a tool that records the critique into the creative process, replacing the written word of the group till then. Finally, the predominant art form that arose from artists' need to criticize was performance art, as it emerged in the 1960s and the 1970s, seeking to oppose existing art institutions and traditional forms of theater and visual arts. Constantly searching and inventing new ways of expression, performance artists combine theory with practice, according to what also Adorno again notes in Negative Dialectics. Without theory, practice that constantly seeks to bring about change could not exist. And we come to today, that written text is considered rather outdated or boring to read. The word broad is no longer enough to describe the spread and use of the internet and the plethora of websites, blogs, or even personal profiles and social media pages. In our time, anyone can be a critic by uploading a photo, tweeting a text, or announcing his or her presence and feelings in a theater. Don't these posts produce aesthetics? Don't they have an aesthetic function? Everyone pays attention to the lighting, the filters, the colors used. As long as this processing lasts, it makes us creative subjects who choose what content to present exactly if we were creating an artistic work or event. At the same time, the reception of what we share works similar to what it would have been if people were confronted directly with some work of art or with our critical note about it. They agree or disagree with us, try or reject our proposal. After all, in the age of social media, the critic is also exposed with his or her work exactly as happens with artistic creation. His critic enters into digital public debate where others judge his judgments. Why then, since the practices of artists are so similar to the practices of critics, and they both share same anxieties and aspirations towards art, as given by Roland Barthes, that observes that artist and the critic will experience the same difficult moments in front of the same object, the work of art. Why are these two or more capacities not united in a single person? In literature, for instance, those who criticize are poets and novelists themselves, and this has never been a taboo. What is it that prevents a theatrical critic from performing his critique? The most useful critique, Wilde says in The Critic as Artist, is the one that offers a new starting point for a new creation. Why cannot this creation come from the same person? How else will a critic be able to know the problems and needs of art and to have a more comprehensive image of it? The storm of ideas and thoughts can find a way out and be expressed both in theory and in practice through the implementation of those thoughts, as the critics of the Cahiers de Cinéma did. The activity of a critic is part of an artistic course, according to Wesley, and in my opinion, it no longer needs to be intertwined with the systematic engagement with the written text, but without excluding it, pave the way for any other activity with which one believes that could influence the criterion of the public. If, as some claim, one of the roles of the critic is to educate the audience, then the audience can be better educated or acquainted with new currents and techniques through artworks or events, and not so much through multi-page academic articles. Concluding, I would like to emphasize that theater has always favored the coexistence of many qualities in a single person, sometimes out of a need for livelihood, and sometimes out of creativity, curiosity, and passion for art. Nowadays, more than ever, there are no barriers and categorizations between who produces a work of art and who has the right to judge it. Criticism is every social and artistic decision we make, every participation in collectives and communities with artistic or non-artistic interests, every creation and every response to the creation of someone else, every imprint we leave behind. All the above are performative behaviors that concern society as a whole, and inevitably they are signals of our approval or rejection of the world, aesthetic or real. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joanna. You touched upon a very thorny and dangerous and slippery concept like what is criticism, who is entitled to criticize, or whether all critiques carry the same value or should acquire the same public visibility, something that we could go on and discuss hopefully later. And also you brought forward the concept, this prefix, meta criticism, meta writing, which are all very interesting and do relate to our conference today. But let me just bring this panel to an end with our fourth reader, who is from Russia. We go back to Russia this time. Dmitry Drupovchkin, who is from Moscow and a Doctor of Sciences in Art Studies. He's the head of the Department of European Classical Art at the State Institute of Art Studies. He's professor at the Graduate School of Performing Arts and at the Russian Institute of Theater Arts. He's also the assistant of the artistic director of Vakhtangov Theater. So Dmitry has this multiple role, and I'm sure he fits so nicely into the overall concept of the conference's title. So Dmitry, just tell us what you think about this new theater encyclopedia. We are all really curious to hear your views on that. Dmitry?
Thank you, dear Savas. It's my pleasure to participate in this conference. Thank you for inviting me. And let me put on the presentation. Is it all right? Now it works. Okay, it's about time for a new theater encyclopedia. In December 2020, the first volume of the new Russian Theater Encyclopedia was published. I took part in this publication as the head of the editorial board of the encyclopedia. It is the heaviest book of all that were published during the pandemic times in Russia. Its preparation started earlier in 2019, but the biggest amount of work was done during 2020, when there was no full life in theaters. The new encyclopedia is called Theater of Russia. This project in the end will include 5 big volumes. The initiative to create the series was formulated during the year of theater in Russian Federation, that is 2019. And then after very intensive debates, we agreed on the structure. 3 volumes for contemporary theater and only 2 volumes for theater heritage. We defined the term contemporary in a very formal and mechanical way. Contemporary, for the aims of our encyclopedia, is the theater of the 21st century. that is after the 1st of January, the year of 2000. Everything before the year of 2000 is considered the heritage. This formal and I should say ruthless approach has its sense. Theoretical discussions on the meaning of the term contemporary started with the start of the theater itself and never ended. The main question for an encyclopedia as regards chronology was usually not when we should start to build an encyclopedic system, but at what point before contemporaneity we should stop. In the biggest Russian theater encyclopedia that was published in 1960s and dedicated to the world theater history, the upper chronological point was 1930s. In the latest World Encyclopedia of Contemporary Theater, edited by Don Rubin and published in 1990s, the upper chronological point was 1960s. Usually we know well the starting point, the beginning of ancient theater of the turn of the 20th century, and finish roughly about a generation before our times. In other words, we start from a definite point in history and finish in a cloud of contemporaneity. We thought we should turn around and change the perspective of our glance, to start our series at a precise point of the contemporaneity and finish in the clouds of our history. The 2 volumes on heritage will be called Great Names and Great Performances, and will include the contemporary scholarly image, with the results of latest archive research, of course, of the most influential phenomena of the period from the 17th up to the 20th century. Thus, the encyclopedic system will realize the vision of what is Russian theater now, with its widest regional panorama, with a great many names of the present, this and that and that and that, and just few names from the great past. Why I thought this subject would be good for our conference? The dramatic aspect of our new encyclopedia, strangely, was in its direct connection with the lockdown of 2020, which legitimized, so to say, our new way of thinking. We were still in doubt at the end of 2019 whether we have a right to generalize the present without a kind of break point, the kind of theoretical stop in theater process to look behind. At the beginning of 2020, we got not theoretical, but real stop in theater processes for at least half a year. So we got an opportunity to look behind. I feel it was a very dramatic moment. Specialists in digital economy say that the global shift from the offline life to the online life was to happen inevitably, even without pandemic. The corona crisis just accelerated it. In Russia, what was planned to develop for years in normal scenario flew in just a few months, and we all flew into the online. The same we could say about the new academic perspective for building encyclopedias. On the internet, the encyclopedic knowledge of contemporary art processes is already everywhere. Contemporaneity dominates over history. The same was true about the first theater encyclopedia in Europe, the Italian edition by Francesco Bartoli, historical notes on Italian actors. There were 472 articles in it, and 370 of them were on contemporaneity. That is 78%. Corona crisis just accelerated the academic approval of the encyclopedic knowledge of our present day theater to include this and that and that and that. And this was the major change in the theatrological paradigm, which I meant to bring to your attention today. So it's about time for a new theater encyclopedia. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dimitri. I have to thank all readers for sticking to the time limit. These online meetings always tend to run over time, but you were very you respected the 7-minute time limit, 7-minute time. Thank you all, and thank you for bringing to our attention numerous issues that can keep us discussing and talking about them for quite a while. But I would like to ask at this point a good friend and person who put this project, this online project together, Octavien Sayou. in order to chair the discussion or the final commentary of this second panel, of both panels. Octavian, can you please take over?
Thank you, Savas, very much for chairing things so gracefully and so effectively, and also for touching upon the main aspects introduced by the speakers. And there have been so many of them, and I am absolutely enchanted by the variety and the richness of the perspectives that have been introduced by Emilia, by Michelle, by Ioana, and by Dimitri. And I must say that I know some of them very, very well, but I have only just met Ioana in this mediated fashion and discovered the subtle nuances that she can produce when referring to something that I believe is at the heart of what we're talking about, authorship as authorship. The transitioning between theater and cinema with regard to this notion, I think, is something for everybody to look at when considering the multiple identity of the contemporary theater artist. Because in being this and that, an artist is primarily, fundamentally, an author and an auteur. I mean, it's actually so easy to go on and on about the themes that have been already presented, but I would very much like to take this opportunity to introduce some people who are part of this event at multiple levels, but are not exactly paper presenters in the traditional sense of the expression, not even in the online definition of it. I'm talking about three people who are from different parts of the world but share the same interest in the topic of the conference. Juning, our friend from Beijing, Rui Pina Coelho, our colleague and friend from Portugal, and Ephraim Villafania, who is a new acquaintance that was brought into the context of the conference by a common friend, Ricardo Abad. So I'm going to start this very, very short panel session by asking Rui to provide some feedback, to share some thoughts, to add something personal to what has already been said here from the point of view of somebody who is a critic with multiple identities, but also a critic who has been looking at various artists that display the same pattern of encompassing multiple aspects of creativity. So Rui, I think this is the right time for you to join the conversation and express some points of view.
Absolutely, Octavian, everybody, dear friends. Thank you very much for allowing me this floor for some brief thoughts. It's a pleasure it has been a pleasure for being able to listen to you all with your fine thoughts on the subject. And my first remark is on the title of this this online conference, this and that, and then this and that and that. And I think it kind of summons up pretty much the work that we do as critics, as cultural agents, cultural mediators in our professional adventures, in our professional lives. It's more on my regard. It's more and more difficult to find a critic to work exclusively as a critic. For those who know my thought on the subject, you know that I'm pretty gloomy or pessimistic about the subject. I think that theater criticism is under attack of a neoliberal capitalist system, and I think that its vanishment is not by hazard, not by chance. It's a result of a series of acts that diminish the public sphere. And I think that criticism has been in the last 10 years pretty much evolving into a field where it can survive, away from newspapers, away from the bourgeois public sphere. It has been moving to the rehearsal room. It has been moving into the sphere of artistic creation. I pretty much enjoyed listening to Johanna Jutz when she recalled Adorno, when she recalled Brecht, when she recalled the French directors, Truffaut, Chabrol, Godard, etc., on their role as critics and then authors. I think that we have been in this vice versa movement pretty much in the last few years. So it's very difficult to find only this without the that and the that and the that. And I think that etymologically and ontologically, criticism has always been like that. It's kind of it's normal to find the birth of dramaturgy in Lessing's book, the Hamburg Dramaturgy. But again, Lessing's work is also the birthplace of a new concept, a notion for theater criticism. Dramaturgy and criticism for me has been always moving along in our Western European tradition. And I don't want to take much more time. This is my first thought on the subject. Thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you, Rui. I really appreciate the aspects that you have mentioned, and I echo your thoughts on this continuous blending between criticism and dramaturgy in the European sense. From Lessing to nowadays, it has been constantly reinforced by a modern tradition that has multiple ramifications. And I thank you also for being a partner in this project with your heart, with your soul, and with your mind. And your mind is that of a critic, but is also that of somebody who is an artist, because you are so deeply involved in so many artistic projects, and you write for the theater, not just about the theater. I'd like to invite Zhening, my very dear friend from Beijing. She's an academic, she is a critic, she is an interpreter, translator herself, and somebody who has been, I believe, at the forefront of cultural diplomacy through theater in China. I'm not going to go through the history of our friendship and collaboration. Suffice it to say that I owe her my discovery of the Central Academy of Drama in Beijing, and in a sense, my enduring friendship with our colleague Pang Tao, who's the head of the creative writing department over there. So Zhening, a few thoughts at the end of this first day of our conference.
Thank you very much, Octavian, to have me in the conference. And it is very interesting because, it is very interesting in China. Actually, we have the opposite way of the role of theater critics. Before 2008, I don't think in China, the theater critics are visible. They are totally mute. They are totally mute because it is a very strange phenomenon, and because it is a very strange phenomenon. At that time, there were no independent theaters, and actually, I don't think that there were, regular theater goers. Theater circles at the time was a very small and intensive circle, only existing in Beijing and Shanghai. To be specific, the major national theater companies and the theater schools in Beijing and Shanghai were the only islands of theater art at the time. You cannot imagine. So actually, we made ourselves this and that and this, but not theater critics. Who would be our readers? It was such a small circle. We were theater makers. We wrote with theater makers, and we were audiences. So it was very interesting. And as audience, we very special. We don't we didn't buy tickets because at the time all the government paid everything, so you could the tickets were not sold, the tickets were allocated, so you could always find someone to bring to find your ticket or to bring you in. So we do not criticize, because the theater makers were all our colleagues, very close friends and everything, it's too small circle. And after 2008, actually after 2010, things changed a lot. First of all, at that time, a lot of theater venues, buildings were built. There were fancy theater houses built everywhere, not only in Beijing. You all know the Big Egg close to the Tiananmen Square. After that, a lot of new fancy theater buildings appeared in in some big cities, actually fairly big cities. Almost in every capitals of the provinces, there would be a newly built fancy theater houses at their local landmark. And the vessels are ready, so people, there was a need for the contents. So after the year of 2010, the international theater festivals just exploded in China. So to be honest, at that time, the theater practitioners in China, they were shocked. They were shocked by their European colleagues, because they didn't understand what was happening on the stage in the Western, on the Western stage. So at that time, we critics suddenly became very useful. We were invited to make a kind of appreciation guide before or after, or conduct discussions before and or after the the European shows. And in the year of 2010, the publication of a layman's post-dramatic theater was another shock. So theater practitioners in China, they actually even now it still caused harsh controversies. Personally, I think it was because few Western important theater theories have been translated, except for post-dramatic theater, Artaud's cruise theater, post theater by Grotowski, the theater of absurd by Aisling. We translated nothing. So 10 years ago, around the year of 2010, few of Chinese directors and the theater practitioners ever watched, the stage works by Grotowski, by Robert Wilson. Yeah, few of them heard of Robert Wilson, Lepage, Gandon. No one heard of them. So in such a circumstance, in such a situation, we Chinese critics, are becoming visible. Now actually, I think before the pandemic era, it was a best time for Chinese theater critics. Some important international theater festivals are cooperating with IATC China section, such as Laoshe International Theater Festival and the Wuzhen International Theater Festivals. And we organized seminar, we invited the theater, Western theater critics. Octavian went there, Savas went there, and actually it was a very good chance for, also, after the year of 2008, ordinary people, they just like the exploration of Chinese tourists in the European cities. In China, a lot of ordinary people, they buy tickets. They just, especially some parents of middle-class families. Not in the big cities, but in some small cities, they buy tickets. They take their kids to the theater once they have chance. So at the time, theater critics are invited to, to explain or to tell this both ordinary audience and some theater practitioners in China what happened on the Western stage, and what is happening now. So now I feel myself just like a real theater critic. So last year I was invited twice. Once by Christie's auction, Shanghai. They conducted an online talk to introduce one of their important auction, 1623 first folio for Shakespeare. So they just invited me to introduce not only the book, but also the Shakespearean the performance of Shakespearean era. And everything about Shakespeare. Of course, a lot of interesting things to say, and it was well received. I was told later by their staff, by the staff of Christie's auction. And another invitation was by Lauscher International Theatre Festival. I was invited to to address to the ordinary audience, to introduce the ideas of the production. It was a production by the National Comedy Company of France. I don't know the French pronunciation. So that's some experience I would like to sharing with you. And also my conclusion, actually I don't have a conclusion, only some observations which can sharing with you now.
I think, if you don't mind, I think it's better to leave the observations and the conclusions open, given the fact that our time is almost over. So thank you very much for your passionate speech and for introducing us into this very, very cultural specificity of the Chinese theater today, which involves politics, it involves identity, it involves openness, diplomacy, and so many other aspects. And I'm so pleased to realize that the critics are very much part of this constant changing of the landscape in Chinese contemporary culture. I would like to invite now a new friend, Ephraim, to say a few words about everything that we've been talking about here, but also about his own perceptions and thoughts about the very topic of the conference.
Octavian, thank you for inviting me and allowing me to be part of this international forum conference for theater. First, with the title of These and That and That and That, we all know that this is more on demonstrative of like when I was trying to hear everyone what they are trying to present, the papers and all our keynote speakers, I was like shopping new ideas. Shopping from left and right and ideas about what should I bring as an academic of a university, being a senior advisor of a theatrical group and a leader for a community-based theater here in my city. So those are the things. But more of that is the situation now in the Philippines is the theater is being more democratized when it comes to the access of the theater and its performances, meaning that since the pandemic happened, many theatrical groups and companies put their performances online for free. Sometimes it's for donation, and it's becoming more accessible to people. And I think it has more of the better result than what we know that sometimes people are taking this job of performing arts, the theater, for granted. So going with that point, it gave me an idea to really push for the professionalism of being a theater critic here in the Philippines, because as of the moment, there is no institutionalized program to professionalize critics for theater. There are a lot of research because we know that if we look into the very deep essence of critics in theater, we know that it's like a marriage of being an academic and performing artist, meaning that just like what Joanna said a while ago, that it's the creation and the critic must be on the same page. It must be on the same platform. By that, we can always also see here in the Philippines that Philippine theater is part of the movement to reform our government and to raise issues, meaning that society and situation is being part of the performances in theater. And with that, it is becoming one of the identity of the Philippine theater. It's about simulation, the simulation of what is happening. And sometimes it's also predicting what is going to happen next in the society, with the politics and with all the struggles that is happening within the society. Now, to end this short message to everyone, from being demonstrative of being this and that and that and that, it became more personal and became more possessive on my part, that it became, I want this, I want that, and I want that for my country and for all the critics in my country and for my organization and for my local and for my community-based theater for that. So thank you everyone for inviting me here and allowing me to be here. And I learned a lot. I've learned so many, so that when I meet again the people who are working with me, I will share them more ideas. Thank you.
Thank you, Ephraim. Thank you. I appreciate the content and the briefness of your intervention. And I couldn't be more grateful for keeping it under 3 minutes, given that we really need to wrap up very, very soon. But I cannot finish without saying a big, big thank you to everybody who has been a part of this first day of the conference, to the speakers, to the chairs, to the mere witnesses, and the most distinguished presence that has been a quiet one, a very, very understated one, but an essential contribution that I would like to refer to is that of Tobias Biancone, the Director General of ITI. There have been many, many people who have been with us and haven't been seen, haven't been heard, but their presence is felt. And I think it is something that relates to the vibes of theatricality, even in an online fashion. Presence is still everything. To be there in spirit and in body is still the very crux of what theater is about. So having said this, I'd like to also thank the wonderful team in Hong Kong, Bernice and her colleagues, for supporting us with all the technicalities. And I know that there have been some challenges today. I'd like to thank everybody who has tuned in to watch this conference on different Facebook pages. I'd like to thank everybody who has supported it by disseminating the information, by contributing one way or another to creating a sense of awareness with regard to the fact that it is happening. And I like to thank everybody for believing in theater and for actually convincing us that what we do by means of sharing thoughts and engaging in a cultural dialogue is a form of performative criticism and creativity at the same time. Thank you, and see you all tomorrow at the same time. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Octavian.
Thank you.
Good rest. Thank you. Thank you all. Nice to see you all.
Nice
Thank
to
you so
see
much.
you.
Nice to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.